Another day, another video. This time I'm here to talk about who gets the playoffs. I did discuss yesterday in the video. It's in the description below if you want to check it out. Who gets the automatic places? Well, there are 4 teams going for the automatic places, only 2 on offer. So that means 2 of those are going to be dropping into the playoffs. And that means there are 2 spaces remaining in the playoffs. Who can go for those? I'm going to talk about quite a few teams who may or may not be jumping into the playoffs this season. And it's a long list. Right, so first up, I want to talk about Oxford. Now, I know that's a bit of a weird one because they are pretty low down. But I would say below Oxford, you can draw a line under Oxford because pretty much every team below Oxford now, they're in a relegation battle. Oxford had done really well. And at the time when they got rid of Des Buckingham, it was a weird decision. A lot of Oxford fans were angry. A lot of neutral fans were scratching their heads saying, why have they got rid of Des Buckingham? He's done a wonderful job. Well, Gary Rowett's come in. He's hit the ground running. He's only had 1 loss in his first 10 or so games, and he has really pulled Oxford away from the relegation zone. But was it all entirely Gary Rowett? There were very well documented cases of the massive injury crisis that Oxford had leading up to Des Buckingham's sacking, Dembele being out, Goodrum being out for a little bit, Mark Harris was out the team for a little bit as well. They've had a strong January transfer window, bringing the likes of Mikkel Helik, Alex Matos, even Tom Bradshaw, who worked with Gary Rowett at Millwall. And he can, to be honest, he can share the burden with Mark Harris up top. And they're sort of clear of injuries. Goodrum's back, Dembele's really looking good. And Helik has really settled into the back line. He's already scoring goals for them. It's a big ask. It's a big ask. And is this form sustainable? It could just be a nice run of form that's led them away from the relegation zone. But I guess these final run of games will be really telling. And another team that has a lot to ask to make that run into the playoffs, that's QPR. And they are off the back of, well, the form has dips. They hit that really hot run of form that sort of shot them off the bottom of the table, and it has all clicked. They're another team that were completely decimated with injuries for the first half of the season. Injuries have gone away, and they blooded youngsters. Like Coley is one that is really one for the future. He also has a tremendous head of hair. He also knows where the back of the net is, and he's very silky and skillful. He is one that QPR in the summer, they're going to have a real tough job fending off all the people that want to take him off their hands. QPR have sort of priors in terms of developing great talents. Look at Eberechi Eze. They couldn't hold on to him for too long. And that could be the case with Coley. But anyway, I'm here to talk about QPR's playoff credentials. They could potentially make it. I'd say they are probably one of the least likely to make it, considering it is 2 spots we're talking about here. But they did some good business, like with the likes of Ronnie Edwards, and there are some unknown quantities, like Harvey Vale signing, and I'll try and butcher this guy's name, Esquadinho. I think I nailed it.
Nailed it.
But ultimately, they haven't really got that striker that is prolific enough. I like the look of Michael Frey. He's very good at bringing others into play, but realistically, he's not really prolific enough to lead a team to the playoffs, and there are only so many tight victories you can eke out. So they are in with a shout for the playoffs, but I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this season. Marti Cifuentes should be commended for the tremendous work he has done, and fair play to QPR for sticking with their guns and keeping him in charge. Now, I want to talk about Watford. Look, firstly, I'll be very upfront about this. There is no chance Watford make the playoffs this season. They started the season really well. after being tipped for being rock bottom. And look, as a Luton Town fan, I am possibly the last person that could be laughing at Watford's season. Do I enjoy the fact that they have tailed off after such a promising start? You bet. Yeah, I'm very happy. Unfortunately for them, injuries have hit the likes of Ebisele and Bah. They are long-term injuries now, and they were quite important, especially Bah. And they also had an injury to Daniel Buchman. And a lot of Watford fans were secretly celebrating the fact that Buchman tore his ACL. But Watford had a very quiet January transfer window, and they brought in a goalkeeper. Surprise, surprise. Let me check where did they get that goalkeeper from? Udinese.
Shocked. We're shocked.
They got him from Udinese. Surprise, surprise. But do I think Watford have what it takes to mount a playoff challenge? No. This form they're on, it's pretty bad. And I think they're going to revert to the mean, possibly mid-table, maybe lower mid-table. We'll see how far this bad run of form takes them. Because right now, like the pack that I'm talking about that are going for the playoffs, it's a streaky bunch. And that is why the top four have sort of just run away with it right now. And there's other combination of factors as well, and I'll talk about them a bit later. So Coventry, moving on to Coventry, this is an interesting one, and I'd say this is actually my wild card for who I think can make the playoffs. And when I was talking about the combination of factors, streaky teams, the teams that are currently in those bottom two playoff spots, they just don't want to hold on to those spots. They really don't. And that is why there's a whole queue of teams that are looking to get into those spots. So Coventry, in my opinion, I've been saying it all season, Coventry have possibly one of the best squads in the division outside the top four. They probably have the best squad all round, pound for pound. They have players in the middle, they have players up top, and they have a decent defence. Regardless of what I think about Frank Lampard, and people that have been watching the show, especially our championship content, like and subscribe, for a while will know I am not a big advocate of Frank Lampard. Look, he does a very good job in this division when he has a very good squad. And if you cast your mind back to the Derby squad that he got to the playoffs, that was a ridiculously good squad. It was. And now he's managing a Coventry team that is once again a very good squad. And he's turned it around. They're winning games on the spin. I think it's 5 in all competitions that they've won on the spin. And that's very good. But they are performing now as Coventry should have. They are performing now as everyone expected at the beginning of the season how Coventry would perform. And they had a quiet January, but they made one of the most significant deals in the championship, in my opinion. Matt Grimes. He's a hell of a player, a technician, wonderful with the ball at his feet. And can you imagine him in the midfield next to Torp and Sheaf when he returns from injury? They'll be dominating games from midfield. So I have them down as like a wild card to sort of make a late dash into those final playoff positions. I genuinely think they can do it, regardless of Frank Lampard. And this is not me being biased against Frank Lampard. I personally don't think he is a great manager. I don't think he is. And he's shown that with other places where he's managed when he doesn't have all the abundance of riches that a Derby or a Coventry or the ridiculously talented Chelsea youth setup when Chelsea had that transfer embargo. I just don't rate him. But that's nothing against Coventry. I think they're an all right team with one of the best squads in the division. Moving on to Sheffield Wednesday now, they are placed really well for an assault on the playoffs. However, they had a very quiet January. Obviously, very public off-the-pitch issues, what with Chansiri not backing or communicating with Danny Rowe, but they have one of the most important factors in mounting a playoff push, and that is a well-drilled team due to the coach, Danny Rowe. He is one of the best coaches in the division, and what he's done with this is their second year in the Championship. He's doing a great job. He's got Barry Bannon in the middle, dictating play, fair play. Barry Bannon rolling back the years because he's got to be at least 50 years old by now. And he's got young, energetic players around him. They've recruited well in the summer, so it sort of offsets the lack of doing stuff in January. I don't know if they have the depth to sort of push on further, but they could have a shout in the playoff reckoning, I suppose. I reckon they'll be top 10 at the very least, and their playoff chances won't completely disappear until right at the end of the season. I do think they will keep going, but they will fall short. And this even includes like two good signings. I guess it was a relatively quiet January, as I was saying. Ibrahim Sissoko, he did great stuff at Plymouth on his day. On his day, he can be a relatively streaky player, but he's also an exciting player when he's on it. Stuart Armstrong, I don't know if he's going to impact it too much. He's got to be getting on a bit. He's come from the Australian League as well. I don't know if he has the legs in it to run a midfield, especially a midfield that also has Barry Bannon, where even Barry Bannon doesn't entirely have the legs to run a midfield by himself. He needs sort of young, energetic players next to him, but he's a good player to come in and sort of take over from Barry Bannon if Barry Bannon needs a rest. Now, I've said Barry Bannon a lot. I think if you say it enough times, he appears behind you and tells you to stop making jokes about his dodgy hair. Like the Candyman. Right, on to the next one. And I want to talk about Bristol City. So, although they're ninth in the table, I don't think they have serious playoff aspirations. They didn't make any deals in the January transfer window, which is very odd because there is a real lack of quality in their squad, with the exception of Scott Twine. They are relying on an aging Nahki Wells now to sort of get goals that aren't provided by Scott Twine. Defensively, they're all right. They do all right defensively. But as I said, they don't have the quality to really push into the playoff picture. And to be honest, if they had aspirations of the playoff, they should have recruited in the January window to give an indication of that want to get into the playoffs. So sadly, I think they're going to miss out. But as of right now, they are in with a shout of the playoffs. But it's a very aggressive playoff push from everyone around them. So I do feel they will revert to their mean of 12th place, because that's what Bristol City do best.
Right in the middle. It was like...
When I thought about who could make it into the playoffs, you got to include Norwich. You can never write off Norwich. They have a good starting 11, and they're bolstered by the return of Josh Sargent. Just have a look at what impact he's had since returning. However, under Johan Hothorup, they are very streaky. There's no getting around that. Hopefully Josh Sargent is able to get them out of games and get them through games. The transfer window for them, though, they brought in unknown quantities at this level, with the likes of Lewis Dobbin and Jacob Wright, who's been brought in from Man City. He's just a kid at this level. We don't know what he's actually going to be able to do. But I do think they will miss out on the playoffs. However, they are still in with a shout for the playoffs, potentially. And now we get into, well, I say it, the serious contenders for the playoffs, the ones that are positioned best right now. So Middlesbrough currently not in the playoffs, but they've lost Emmanuel Latte-Laff, but they lost him for a significant fee, £20 million to Atlanta, which is crazy money for the MLS. But they've taken that money and they've reinvested it into the squad. So they have the likes of Morgan Whittaker, who's come in for a reported £8 million. However, his primary position being the right wing, with Ben Doak, who's there and is a tremendous talent at this level, however on loan. So with Middlesbrough, they have a settled team. And they brought in Ryan Giles on the left side, so he's competing with Timon Bergzog now. And up top, they have Force. And they've also brought in Kelechi Iheanacho, who is very good at this level. We saw it with Leicester last season. And they have that abundance of riches. And that's not even forgetting, well, I kind of forgot, Finn Azaz in behind, who is not only a goal scorer, but a tremendous creator. So if they can sort out their defence, because they do tend to leak a couple of goals here and there, but it is a case of we will score more than you. And if that happens, then they will accumulate enough wins to sort of barge their way into the playoffs. So I do think they are the most likely of the teams I've mentioned to make the playoffs. What does that mean for the teams who are currently in the playoffs? So West Brom and Blackburn. Well, West Brom, since Tony Mowbray's come in, and that is a brilliant feel-good story. They were without a manager for a long time, without Carlos Corberán. I think the significance of the business in bringing in Adam Armstrong, who is very good at this level. We saw it with Blackburn. We saw it with Southampton. He's very good, but he's out of favour in the Premier League with Southampton. He's very good to fill the boots of Daryl Dike and Josh Maja while they're out. However, leaky at the back. A bit inconsistent. Well, I mean, they were remarkably consistent with all those draws. However, now that Tony Mowbray's in, it's sort of become a bit more streaky, and I can see them sort of falling away as the teams beneath them gather some momentum. And that brings me on to another one of Tony Mowbray's former teams, Blackburn Rovers, who I think have recruited really poorly. And yes, they are the team in position at the moment. But when you're bringing in Cauley Woodrow as your saviour, well, he's not the saviour, I'd say he's like the third choice striker there, isn't he? But he's definitely not a very good bench option. And look, I'm going to stop with the Cauley Woodrow bashing. They also brought in Emmanuel Dennis, who, without doubt, his best football is behind him. His best football was last time in the Premier League with Watford. And since then, he hasn't really done too much. But once again, him and Cauley Woodrow are both bench options, with Gay being the first choice there. They also have their Premier League loans, Akosia Dubry. They're good. John Eustace is a very good manager. However, that defensive solidity has sort of slipped recently. And don't get me wrong, they have a crazy long injury list, which is fair. A lot of teams at this time of season, they have long injury lists. But I do feel they are not going to win as much as the teams that are chasing them. And we've seen this with all these teams. Like, there are 10 teams pretty much jockeying for position. They're all kind of streaky. And that's why I went all the way down to Oxford, because they are the form team at the moment. Them and QPR, they're both in very good form. So they will push up the division. And there isn't too much between them and the two positions right now. But ultimately, all these teams are pretty much vying for 2 spots. As I said before, I'm not trying to win back all the Sunderland fans, but between, I'd say, my 4 that would make the playoffs will be Sunderland, Burnley, Coventry, and Middlesbrough. It will be a very interesting playoff, but ultimately, I think Sunderland probably have the most about them, and with such a young team and so many talents, if they can hold on to them, the likes of Joe Bellingham, Chris Rigg, Dan Neil, there are so many. I do think if Sunderland fall short and don't make it through the playoffs this season, I can see them mounting a serious title charge next year, but I just think they will fall short of the title charge this season. That's not to say I don't rate what Sunderland have done and what Regis Labrie has brought this season, because he's done a great job. But look, anything can happen in the playoffs. Anything. But those are my thoughts about who's going to finish in the playoffs and who's in with a shout to make it into the playoffs. Next up will be the relegation battle and who I think is going to get relegated. Trust me, I'll be doing it head over heart.
So sad.
But let me know in the comments who is going up in the playoffs, who's going to make the playoffs. As always, remember to subscribe, and whoever you support, have a great day.